Listen, the message is really simple. We've got to start talking to each other. We've got to start solving problems. We've got to get rid of the ideology, and you've got to be fired up to make it happen because the partisans are fired up. The forces of division are fired up. The forces that want to pull us apart and put us into categories are fired up. There has to be support for people who want to solve problems, who want to tell the truth, who want to work a 5-day week, who want to do the things that we need to do to get this country going. And it's what is on the minds of the public. I was the only candidate in the country where people had a real choice. If you stop and think about it, your choices are determined by the parties by and large. And in Maine, people had a third choice. In fact, my favorite comment from the whole campaign was a guy that came up to me in northern Maine one day and said, "All my life, I've wanted a chance to vote for none of the above. And you're it." But the point is, people are more interested in solving the problems than they are about fighting about them. I mean, that was what I found during the campaign. I would go around to small towns, talk to people. People would come up to me on the street. They didn't come up to me and say, "What do you think about health care? What do you think about the fiscal cliff? What do you think about Afghanistan?" They came up to me and said, "Why the hell can't those people down there talk to each other? Why can't they work together? Why can't they sit together? Why can't they compromise?" Compromise. You know, the irony of these folks that are coming to Washington saying, "I'm not going to compromise," is that the United States Senate itself was a product of compromise. The great dispute at the Constitutional Convention was how representation should work, and the big states wanted it by population. The smaller states were afraid of the big states. They almost broke up until they came to what was called the Great Compromise, which was the creation of the U.S. Senate, an institution that represented the states, whereas the House represented the population. So to go to the U.S. Senate or go to Congress and saying, "I'm not going to compromise," is just crazy. That's how we solve problems. Anybody who tells you, "I am not going to compromise," is really telling you, "I have all the answers." And I've never found anybody that has all the answers. Our whole lives are based on compromise. My wife and I compromise 5 times a day. It usually consists of my saying yes. But compromise is born of respect. It's also born of relationships. And I mentioned the 5-day work week. I worked at the Congress as a staff person in the 70s. I saw it work. I saw senators sit around a table, argue, disagree, agree, reach consensus, and move important legislation. Part of the reason was they knew each other. They lived in Washington. Their children went to school together. They had barbecues. They played golf. They had a beer on a Friday night. An old friend of mine once said, "You can't hate someone if you know the names of their kids." It's a profound observation. And one of the problems now is that everybody leaves on, as was previously mentioned, they leave on Thursday afternoon and come back Monday evening. And so you don't have the relationships. It's all warfare all the time. And we have to start breaking that down. Now, I want to leave you with 2 thoughts. One is, I want to leave you with a question that I hope will haunt you for the next few days about whether you should get involved, whether you should do anything. And here's the question, here's the thought. When I was in my 20s, I met an old man in New Hampshire who gave me the most profound piece of advice that I've ever had, and it in fact has changed my life several times, one of which was when I had to decide whether to come out of political retirement and run for the U.S. Senate. And here's what the old guy said. He said, "When you get to be my age, you're going to regret things about your life. See that you regret the things you did and not the things you didn't do." That's a very profound observation. So I want you to cast your mind ahead 4 or 5 years, and if things don't change, and if nothing happens, and the country continues to spiral downward, I don't want you to say, gee, I regret not trying. I regret not reaching out and trying to make a difference. I regret not supporting and getting involved. I regret not helping those people that were trying to solve problems and letting the partisans carry the stage. Don't feel that way. You don't want to have that regret. And the final thought I'll share with you is the most profound observation I've ever encountered about change and about dealing with changed circumstances, and we are in new circumstances. The Congress has not always been the way it is today. We've had great problems in this country, but it hasn't always been locked up the way it is today. Almost exactly 150 years ago, Abraham Lincoln was having a problem with Congress. And the problem was that they didn't understand that the circumstances of the Civil War was a fundamentally different situation than had obtained all through the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, that this was a new situation and they were trying to deal with it in the old partisan political ways. So he sent a message to Congress on December 2nd, 1862, at a low point in the greatest catastrophe that has ever befallen this country. But what he said about change that day and how to deal with it, I think echoes this morning in New York City and across America. And here's what he said. Here's what Abraham Lincoln said. The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and therefore we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country. We must disenthrall ourselves, think differently, and then we shall save our country. Thank you.